Okay. It's surprising how silly you feel standing in front of a giant rainbow. Just get that out the way. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to our fifth birthday celebrations here at GOMA. My name is Peter McKay and I'm Curator of Contemporary Australian Art. And today I'll be talking about this significant birthday present, Emily Floyd Steiner Rainbow. And I'd like to mention first up that this has actually been gifted to the gallery by the artist. And I think that's just a really generous act. It's not just a gift to us, but actually, to everyone here today, to all the audiences that come and see it. So it's extremely generous, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. And also, it's of course a perfect gift for a 5-year-old, so it's a good occasion. So let's dive in. I'm here to talk about rainbows, of course, but I'm actually here to talk more about you. Although this is a very fine rainbow sculpture, it's not really a sculpture about rainbows. Rather, it's a sculpture about how we all relate to the world, how we interact with it. So, there's a whole lot of good things that the artist Emily Floyd wants for you and wants for me. It's really generous work. And let's face it, sometimes life isn't that great, and we could do a little bit better. So, and before I get too far, I'm also going to say something else. I think that probably today we have a little bit of trouble appreciating rainbows. I don't think they hold the significance that they might have in the past. So that's my opinion, but I don't think we've entirely lost that capacity. I think we can regain it. So now that I've gone out on a limb, I'm going to try and prove that all to you. Okay, and before I go too far as well, I just want to distinguish this rainbow from a few other rainbows around town. I don't think this has very much to do with Brisbane's famous Stephane's rainbow that you see across 42 stylists in Brisbane and regional Queensland. Although they may be referencing the same original. And similarly, while preparing this talk, I was a little bit surprised at how many people asked about it in relation to the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender flag, the LGBT pride flag. And I think I just need to distinguish it from that as well. I think any resemblance is kind of incidental. If we count the arcs in the rainbow here, there's 9 arcs. And quite famously, the pride flag has 6 arcs, although originally it was 8 arcs, although 2 colours were a little bit hard to source, so it became simplified. Now that's, since 1978, it's been 6 colours. So, although it's a really important social awareness campaign, it's not really what this rainbow's about. So, what it is about is Steiner. It's a Steiner rainbow. Usually a Steiner rainbow is about 30 centimetres, or 20-30 centimetres. It's a small wooden toy. It consists of 5 to 12 brightly coloured wooden arcs that stack on top of each other like this, and of course can be played with in a number of configurations. And what they are, they're educational toys that explore spatial learning. They teach kids how to think spatially. Okay, so if we're not talking about Stefan here, or sexuality for that matter, who or what is Steiner? Well, Steiner was born in 1861, died in 1925, in what's now Croatia, but it was then part of the Austrian Empire. And he was a philosopher, he was a social reformer, he was actually a very well-known architect, and quite influential today. A lot of organic architecture today is influenced by Steiner's theories and buildings. And he had a really broad range of interests that they often channeled into his central preoccupation, which he termed spiritual science, or the attempt to reconcile mysticism or certain spiritual aspects with the scientific methods. He was the founder of anthroposophy, very difficult to say, a philosophy which promotes the idea that there is a kind of objective and intellectually comprehensible spiritual world, and that this would be accessible through self-discipline, through meditation, and through an active engagement with nature. So what were the spiritual aspects that he was looking at? Well, there's something along the lines of a capacity for perception, intuition, creativity, inspiration, imagination, all within the individual, cultivating these qualities within the individual. So in this regard, Steiner was inspired by Goethe's views that thinking is an organ of perception. So just as we see with our eyes, we hear with our ears, we sort of, thinking is how we perceive ideas. It's another organ of perception. So most people today, though, they would know Steiner from Steiner schools or Waldorf schools. And the more religious aspects of Steiner philosophy remain somewhat controversial in secular society. But despite that, many of Steiner's approaches, teaching methods, are still used quite broadly in public and private education today, particularly among early childhood. And I might add, actually, that a lot of Steiner's beliefs would now be considered hocus pocus, and they were littered with superstitions. However, I think his basic premise, and I quote, "The soul needs nourishment as well as the body," I think this still holds true. So it could be said that Steiner advocated for a form of ethical individualism, that he thought our own rational thinking was strengthened through spiritual growth and attunement. In order to develop and maintain a society that balances the competing areas of cultural life, the economy, and human rights, he believed that citizens need to be mindful individuals with an awareness of their place in the world and vice versa. And when things get out of balance, particularly in a modern context, this is really dangerous. People are faced with crippling alienation, being isolated from society. Well, maybe that's progress for you. So in other words, just to sum up, Steiner sought to develop a proven process by which one might develop the spiritual aspects in a world that, under the authority of science, under the pressure of science, religion was really slipping, losing its grip on the masses. And he didn't want to lose the positive qualities of religion within the population. So, but I don't want anyone to think that this talk is anti-science. I'm not trying to give science a bad rap. And science certainly isn't the reason that rainbows have lost, maybe their former glory. What I might get you to do is just imagine some of the greatest minds of history who have thought about rainbows. And actually the reason we understand what a rainbow is today is because some of the leading philosophers, physicists, mathematicians throughout ancient Greece, ancient China, ancient Persia, and medieval Europe have all thought about rainbows really long and hard. And today, because of all their work, I can actually share what a rainbow is with you. And it's this. Can you see? Right. So what that is, that's a diagram of the science of rainbows, basically. And I trust that on seeing it, it hasn't ruined rainbows for you. I hope not. So basically, what the diagram describes is light entering a droplet of water in the air, suspended in the air, and it's being reflected off the back of the droplet and refracted and coming back out, the full spectrum at 42-degree angle. And the 42-degree angle is quite important, actually. That's why you can never reach the end of a rainbow. But we don't need to despair, but there's still hope for us. Richard Dawkins, very prominent thinker, philosopher, atheist, scientist, has a few comments on this as well. He actually wrote a book called Unweaving the Rainbow. And in it, he argues that it doesn't actually matter if science unravels these mysteries for us. That's not why rainbows are special. And in fact, it doesn't even matter if science proves that there's no purpose to life, that there's no purpose to cosmos. And he explains that this is because we live our lives on a human level. So we rely on our own senses and our own thoughts to make connections with the world. And that's actually what gives us our experience. It gives us our quality of life. And this is quite similar to, I think, what Steiner is saying as well. So in fact, he actually asserts that science in itself is a kind of poetry, and it celebrates the beauty of the world through knowledge about it, through understanding it. So if we let science off the hook, Why do we have a nagging suspicion that sometimes things aren't really right about the world? It's not about losing mystery. And why don't we enjoy rainbows as much as we could? It is a strange question. Maybe it's just rainbows are old news. Think back to before 3D cinema, 5.1 surround sound, a small, or a large flat screen, a flat screen as big as a small car. And of course, instant gratification of an internet download. And you can think back even further, before stadium concerts, before amplified sound, before these light shows that probably consume enough power to supply a small city. A rainbow, before this time, a much simpler world, would have been a miraculous punctuation to a much harder existence. Fleeting, otherworldly, rainbows are rich in transparent vibrancy. Once upon a time, rainbows were the best light show in town. No question. Well, maybe lightning, I don't know. I think they're pretty good. So whether or not we like it, to our contemporary sensibilities, rainbows do look a little bit worse for wear next to our technology. But I remind you, rainbows haven't changed. The science shows a rainbow is still the same. It's still light entering water droplets suspended in the air, refracted, coming back out, 42 degrees. So it's not a rainbow that's changed, it's us that's changed. Maybe we're just overstimulated, I don't know. To return to Steiner, he did warn that there was three things that caused trouble and alienation in society. And this was when three sectors got out of balance: cultural life, the economy, and human rights. So when things were out of balance, there was trouble in society. Maybe we're seeing some of that now. So maybe things are out of balance. It is true that now more than ever, we relate to each other through our systems of government, through our systems of education, through the media, through the economy. This is how we engage with one another. And so, in a really roundabout way, I hope now I've delivered you to the centre of this work. Hopefully we've got to the centre of what Emily wants to do for you. So as an artist, Emily Floyd is interested in notions of alternative education, such as Steiner's spatial education, but also alternative ideas like organic farming and, alternatives to the mainstream, basically. If you think about a small Steiner rainbow, a tool to help children generate new ideas, talk things through, they're very manageable. They're blocks that you can move around in different configurations, and they help you facilitate storytelling and investigate patterns. It helps you explore the world, basically. Being comprised of a series of half circles as well, it's possible to create spirals, it's possible to create waveforms. You could make a series of bridges. When they're pushed back like this, you could say it's a cave, you could turn them upside down, you could say it's a seesaw. The possibilities are they're pretty much endless, even though, they're really rigid forms. So here, this toy is really big. Okay, and in part that's a nod to the sensation that when you're a child, things seem really big around you, and when you're an adult, they lose their monumentality. We're not here. I think the funny thing about this work is you come down, up the escalators, you see it from the end of the walkway, and you think it's just small and cute. And as actually you get closer, you realise, hell, that's as big as a caravan. It gets bigger and bigger as you get closer. It's not what you expect. But here the scale is a lot more than, it's not just a joke, it's actually a meaningful statement. If you wanted to play with this seriously and think about it, if you wanted to play with this, you couldn't do it by yourself, and in fact you couldn't be a child. You'd need to be an adult, you probably need to be half a dozen of you if you wanted to play with this thing really seriously. So this isn't a toy for a child or an individual, this is a toy for a small community. This is for a group of people. So what we have here really is quite a utopian symbol. Floyd invites us to play. She wants us to be flexible with these hardwood blocks. Well, actually, they're MDF, but you get the idea. Really, these are symbolic for action. Here, I think she's really alluding to us, urging us to play with our systems of government, with our thoughts about how things should or need to be structured. Are things administrated the way they need to be? She reminds us, really, that the world is malleable. She reminds us that these systems should empower us, that they should better our world, they should better our lives. They shouldn't hem us in, they shouldn't compromise us. So the strategy that Emily is using here really is textual analysis in some ways. She's interested in taking existing knowledge, putting it in a new context, transcribing it somewhere else, and seeing what new ideas you can get from old ideas. We might also call this a fairly standard appropriation strategy, which has been current since the 1980s and 1990s. I think in the 80s it probably was more concerned with advertising and the media and how that controlled the populace, how that shaped a certain society and how that made us consumers of certain products and put us in our place in a way. And in the 90s it got a little bit more complicated potentially. It started focusing on things like collective amnesia, nostalgia, and copyright and Creative Commons. And this idea of Creative Commons is also really important. And don't worry, I'm nearly at the end. Cultural commons is the idea that cultural material doesn't really have an owner. In fact, that it can't really be owned. And an extension of that is that by trying to restrict access to this kind of cultural material, particularly film and video, you're locking individuals, you're locking people into the position of consumer. You're taking away their building blocks that just sort of wash over us, distributed by the media. I guess, really, they're taking away the building blocks of our time. So you can see this idea here, even though it's a very specific object, you can see what Emily Floyd's doing with that. So as I promised at the start, this rainbow is about you. It's a rainbow about your potential to participate and engage. It's about your potential as an individual. It's about your capacity to experiment and play, and in doing this, contribute to the world. It's about what you can do to make this a better place. So maybe I like to think that there's still hope for us and hope for the rainbow, that we can still appreciate it, and that we might do this by reimagining our world and carving out a better place for each and every one of us. Potentially, from this place, we might engage with the rest of the world more fully. Essentially, by taking responsibility for the world, for our world, we might appreciate anew. So, I think that's it. I'm sorry that was so long. I got a bit carried away. But,
does anybody have any questions? I think we have a couple of minutes for some questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any quick questions from the audience?
Is it always shown like this?
No, it's very flexible. The rainbow, Emily hasn't put parameters on it, and I suppose that's quite reflective of the work. Unfortunately, people can't just come up and play with it because it's not that strong, but curators can come and play with it with gloves on. Maybe it would be nice actually if we had big plastic ones out in the forecourt that people could play with and work together, I don't know. But you know, there is that inbuilt flexibility to the work, so yeah.